Now, we've all seen it. You go to McDonald's and you say, "Hey, $5 for a meal," and if you want to have I think the extra value meal is medium fries and medium Coke is like an extra dollar. Then if you want to have the super size, it's $2 more. And people normally go for it because obviously you get a lot more. And if you do the quick math in your head, yeah, it makes a lot more sense. Matter of fact, my wife and I will do that. Like, we both can't eat enough to eat a meal ourselves. So we'll, like, if we go to McDonald's, which I definitely do not advocate in this class, we'll go down and say, okay, one person will get a large, and then I'll just add on a sandwich. Okay. Which caused another problem, which is dilution of your profits. I'm not going to go into that too much here, but yeah, basically these strategies work great as long as you don't dilute the sales of the full price products. But so it's interesting. I get asked every once in a while, how can McDonald's afford to give you twice as much stuff for only $1 more? Well, you'd be surprised. They make a lot of money doing this, and I'm going to go over that right now. So here's an example. I'm going to take the normal meal is $5, then the extra value meal is $6, and when I'm bringing a super value meal is $7. So if you look at the normal meal, your fixed costs, a quick update, fixed costs are those costs that are spread across every item that you make and do not change regardless of how many you make. Like, for instance, fixed costs are like the rent, things that are fixed every month. And the way that you generally determine how the fixed costs are absorbed by your product is you look at how much you make, how many of a product you make, and you divide that into your fixed cost. That basically says each of your items creates covers that part of your fixed costs. So in this example, each hamburger that we sell, $2 of each hamburger meal goes to fixed costs. So fairly simple. Variable costs are the costs associated with each item. Basically, it's the hamburger, the fries, the raw goods it takes to make your thing. Okay, and those are priced. Those variable costs are related to the product itself. Okay, so if you make, let's say, if you make 10,000 cheeseburgers, your fixed costs won't change for that month. But if you make 10,000 cheeseburgers, your variable costs will change every, if you make 20,000 cheeseburgers, your variable costs just double. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So if you look at, general math, with this, the price is $5 and your total cost is $3, so your profit's $2. Now, the great thing about this example is that the fixed costs are absorbed by the normal meal. So if you can charge anything above the price of the normal meal, all you have to pay for is the difference in the variable costs. I had an uncle who worked at PepsiCo a long time ago, and he used to tell me that, and I actually inflated it. He said, now this was about 20 years ago, so to be fair, it's probably more, but back then, for a McDonald's to offer supersize, you're talking about an extra 2 or 3 cents for the French fries and maybe 1 cent for the soda. So if they charge you an extra $1, in that example, like 95 cents of that goes straight to profit.
Yeah.
So supersizing is really good as far as making extra profits concerned, because as I said, the original offering absorbs the fixed costs. The fixed costs are covered in the sale. So anything above what you can get, most of that goes to profit, because the margins and the variable costs are significantly higher, and as you go up the size food chain, so to speak. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, I see you. Don't worry about it. Thanks for going on mute, by the way. So you can do something similar in your supply chain. Theory of constraints talks about this quite a bit. And if you don't know what theory of constraints is a methodology used to control a supply chain through, whoops, hold on a minute. Sorry, I need to close this real quick. Sorry. So it's basically about controlling the supply chain through monitoring the flow through a system while also identifying constraints, removing the constraints. It's all about maximizing flow through a system. It's similar to lean supply chains because lean supply chains talks about flow also, but lean's more about tackling waste within a supply chain, whereas theory of constraints is all about addressing constraints through that restrict flow. If there's any interest, I might give a small video class on theory of constraints as we go along. So if you have a supply chain, let's say your supply chain makes hamburgers, and your supply chain is designed for where the first 10,000 cheeseburgers absorbs the fixed costs. And within theory of constraints, when you, actually within most supply chain systems, sorry, if you, the way that you calculate the absorption of fixed costs as you look at your expected demand and you divide your fixed costs into your expected demand. So let's say if your expected demand is 10,000 cheeseburgers and your fixed costs are $10,000. In this example, each cheeseburger goes towards $1 worth of your fixed costs. Now let's say that you have a very good month where your demand goes to 15,000 cheeseburgers. The great thing about this scenario is if you're in a very competitive market, you can actually drop your prices of those extra 5,000 cheeseburgers so that all you really have to worry about covering is the variable costs. Does that make sense? Great. So, and this works out very popular also because if you are in a very competitive market and you need to worry about matching prices, then you could do this. Of course, you don't know ahead of time when you're going to when your demand is going to exceed your predicted demand, but through certain strategies and certain marketing strategies, if you can, you can exploit this. So I'd say, hey, look, we're going to have this campaign where we expect demand to go up by 2,000. So therefore, we could offer that product at a cost lower than normal because the fixed cost, which is usually a pretty good portion, like for instance, labor is a fixed cost for the most part because unless you have people working overtime, which in a theory of constraint system, you don't do that very often because you let the system set the tempo. So for the most part, labor can be a fixed cost. So if you've already absorbed all your fixed costs, that gives you a substantial advantage pricing your products because you don't have to worry about the fixed cost portion. Okay. So now Amazon does a very good job of what is called demand smoothing, and what it is, or demand leveling. What it is you set the demand for the customer to match your ability of your supply chain to meet the demand. And I'm going to give an example in a minute. But basically, what Amazon does really three things. There's one that I didn't add to this, but First thing is a price shifting strategy, and I've actually seen this personally. What they'll do is, let's say you type in and you go to something that's matter of fact, like earlier I was looking at routers, so I typed up router and it was like a D-Link router, and it said, hey, here's the one that you're looking for. And it said, but hey, we have one that's a little bit better that actually costs less. So what they do there is they say, hey, look, I know you want product A, but we have product B, which is either as good or not better, but we have a higher inventory of them, or they have a better lead time. So we're going to give you a price break if you take the product that we already have in inventory. And what that does is that encourages people to shift their demand from one product to another. Okay, does that make sense? It's a very
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've seen it done many times when you're trying to buy something and they offer you something different. Now I understand
Sure.
why.
And there's a reason for that. They're not doing it because they're being generous. They're doing it because you're doing them a favor. And another thing they do is discounted shipping strategy, and they're very good at this. They usually give you several options. Do you want the product now? If so, we'll let you pay like $5 or $6. I'm an Amazon Prime member, so I don't know exactly. I don't remember the exact numbers for the shipping, but let's say you have three rates of shipping. Okay, they'll say, okay, if you want it now, we're going to charge you the higher rate. If you want it kind of soon, we'll let you pay the lower rate. But if you don't have any set time, then we'll actually give it to you for free. And sometimes even say, hey, like they love to give you digital music credits if you take the Slow Boat to China shipping strategy. And this is great for them because the digital music credit doesn't cost them anything. All the licenses and stuff, those are fixed costs that have been absorbed already by Amazon. So to be fair, if they offer you a $1 digital music coupon for you to choose Slow Boat to China mode, it makes sense for them because now they can control when they get the product to you. And that's very powerful because when you start to look at lead time as compared to demand, if you can shift your demand beyond the lead time, which lead time, I don't know if they've covered that already, but lead time is the time it takes to go from customer order to the time that the customer receives it. So if you could shift the customer demand beyond the lead time, which basically is the amount of time it takes for you to get the product in the customer's hand once it's ordered, that's a great strategy. And Amazon, so they say either you can get it right now and we'll pull it from our quote unquote safety stock, but we're going to charge you a little bit for it. Or if you want to get it at about the time that our lead time is, we're going to charge you a little bit because lead times have some variability. So they still want you to ask for it outside of the lead time because it gives them a lot of flexibility to fill the order. And there's so that's how they do that one. It's a very, very powerful way of shifting your demand in lieu of your supply chain, of your lead time.
They're taking risks to quote unquote smooth the demand.
Sure. Well, but you're actually mitigating risk because the more the customer wants it sooner, it adds risk of you being able to fulfill it. Let's say I'm going to show you. Let me just jump to the slide real quick. So I had it later on, but I'll go to this now. So let's say you've got your Amazon, and you track when customers want the product. And you basically have three types of customers. You have people who want the product right now. They want it immediately. So as I hit that button, I want it on my table. Then you have ones that are at the lead time. Basically, if it they don't mind waiting a little bit. So if it takes you 5 days to get something from order to the customer's table, say, okay, I'll wait 5 days. Then you have the ones that, like me sometimes, say, look, whatever, Slow Boat to China. If, I'm in no hurry to have it. It'd be nice, but it's okay. So you've got three buckets of customers. And for the most part, most customers, now this doesn't take into consider things like brand or price elasticity or customer service levels. But in general, most people want it within a certain amount of time, usually within the lead time. If you're, obviously lead time is subjective, but some people are more than willing to wait a little bit of extra time to get their product. So the goal of demand smoothing is you want to shift your demand as far into the beyond lead time as possible. I probably did a horrible job of showing a comparison, but basically you shift the at-once customers over to the other two blocks. And if you can shift your at lead time customers into the beyond lead time customers. Because, like, for instance, and this happens a lot working in defense, we love to order like 10,000 things, and we want it next month. And the reason why they do that in the defense industry is because the government says, okay, here's 1 year's worth of funding. You have to spend it by the end of the year. And we want you to support this program, whatever, for 1 year. So we make forecasts based upon the customer's usage of our product and demand for new products. We need this many parts. So we'll make a one-time order of a lot of parts. Well, we don't use all those parts at once. If we order 5,000 widgets in January, we don't use 5,000 widgets in January. We may use 500 in January, we may use 200 in February, or 500 in March. So in theory, we don't need all that demand all at once. So if you were Amazon selling to the defense industry, you'd say, hey, look, I know you want 5,000 widgets, but we know you're not going to use 5,000 widgets. So why don't we give you, if our lead time is a month, why don't we give you 1,000 widgets in January, 1,000 more in February, 1,000 more in March, 1,000 more in April, and then 1,000 more in May, and we'll give you a really good discount for you to shift your demand so that we don't have to suddenly ramp up and make 5,000 widgets all at once. Okay, this is a good way of shifting your demand to meet your supply chain. If your supply chain can only make 1,000 widgets a month, and all of a sudden you get an order for 5,000 widgets, you got to find a way to get 4,000 widgets. So instead you say, hey, look, customer, I'm willing to basically give you a discount in exchange for you waiting a little bit of time for stuff that you may not even need till now. And in many cases, it's a great deal for companies, because if we order 5,000 widgets, well, we have to store them. If you are able to spread your demand out over months, in theory, they say, well, yeah, that lets the supplier absorb the inventory costs. But in actuality, the supplier is only meeting his supply chain. He's not storing extra stuff. He just matched demand with his ability to make stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're making what they can at their capacity.
Exactly. And let's say your fixed costs are absorbed after 1,000 widgets, and another company comes up and says, hey, we need an order for 500 widgets. Well, you'll say, okay, fine. And let's say this is a very important customer. You'll say, fine, we're going to give you a discount right now, a one-time good deal. If you'll spread your 500 widgets out over 2 months, we'll knock 25 or 30% off the price of each widget. And they'll go, wow, that's a really good deal, but this is only a one-time thing. The next time, of course, we'll have to charge you more. And what that does is, as we said earlier with the fast food example, the fixed costs are already met. So as long as your supply chain has the slack in it, basically, if your supply chain, your production facility is able to make that much more, 100 more, without any strain on the system, all you have to worry about is paying the variable costs associated with each widget. So you can say, yeah, it makes sense to give you a one-time good buy because we're still making a lot of money. We're still getting extra money and supersizing things. So this is a good way, once you've met your fixed costs, of setting up discounts and rebates. And some of the very good companies do this. Toyota does this very well. Um, Outside of automotive, I'm trying to think of companies that I've seen that do it very well. Apple's pretty good about exploiting lead times. They'll say, hey, we have this brand new phone. If you want it now, we'll make you charge this much. But then if you're willing to wait 2 or 3 months, the price will come down. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to shift the demand so their supply chain can spool up. Because later on, they're betting that in a few months, their supply chain will be able to meet more demand. So they want you to push your demand for the product until the supply chain is up and running.
In the case of Apple, are they also trying to fill orders so that they're making their supply chain work at capacity while increasing the revenue?
Sure, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing about the ultimate goal is to match your demand to your supply chain's ability to fill it. And over time, let's say you're making a product for several years. Over time, you'll be able to, through certain theory of constraints and lean strategies, make your supply chain more efficient, whereas your lead time slowly decreases. So using this example, your at lead time customers, obviously this is going to shift, because if you're able to make it at an earlier and earlier lead time, you're going to shift these brackets to the left, which in turn allows you more flexibility in pricing strategies. Vice a company who is unable to do this, they are still stuck with these brackets where they're at. Let's say you have two companies with the exact same lead time for the exact same product. If you have a company that can shift the lead time to the left, that's a very powerful strategy, because now you have more beyond lead time customers. And that's what you want. Okay? And what'll happen is you'll have people who are the other person's at once customers go, well, this guy's having problems meeting my demand because I want it right now and his supply chain's overwhelmed. But this guy can do it, like right now, because his lead time's shorter. And for one company, you may be an at-once customer. You may be asking for stuff quicker than the lead time, but for another company, you might be within the lead time. So now people will jump ship, especially nowadays when quality isn't as much a concern amongst consumer demand. If you're competing and quality isn't an issue, and this is something I also mentioned, a quick caveat. I mentioned to a couple students that, people were saying that, demand, as price goes down, demand goes up, and vice versa, always. And that's not always true. 90% of the time it's true, but sometimes if you Mercedes had this problem where they decided to enter into the low mid cost and low cost auto markets. And what they found out is when they dropped the price of their cars, the demand for the cars actually decreased. And the reason why is when you have brand name recognition, where people buy your car over another brand because of status,
perceived value of quality, perceived quality.
Exactly. If you drop the price, the perceived value goes, well, like if
why is all of a sudden Mercedes selling a crappy cheapy car? It must be not good.
Exactly. What if I walked up to you and said, hey, Roberto, got this Mercedes, I'll sell it to you for $5,000. Top of the line, it's got everything great. You'll go, what's the deal? Yeah. Why are you selling this high quality car for so cheap? Was it in a hurricane? Whatever. So that will that obviously affects that affects price. So for the most part, it always is, price and demand have that relationship, but sometimes it isn't. Mercedes lost a lot of money when they did that. I think they got rid of that finally, but yeah. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that, in the back of your head. So your goal with rebating strategies is to encourage demand, but rebate strategies can also be used to shift your demand, like I just said, like Amazon does. they give you a discount if you're willing to wait a little while. And that's one advantage of online retailers. They have that flexibilities whereas traditional retailers don't. Now, I was talking to a student in class. I think I posted it on the discussion question. Companies are starting to get on board with this. When I went to Macy's during the year, I went to buy a pair of shoes, and now I buy two pairs of shoes because I live overseas. So I said, hey, I like this shoe. You have one pair, but I need another pair too. They said, oh, don't worry about it. All you have to do is go to our website in the store. Or actually, I didn't have to go to the website. They were able to pull it up on their cash register and order it through their online service at the cash register and have it shipped to my address. And there was free shipping for everything. And it actually costs less ordering through there. So what they were saying is hey, look, we understand that you come to our store, and if you want it now, that's fine. We'll charge you the extra price to meet our fixed costs. But if you're willing to wait and you don't want to buy it now and pay the extra price to be an at-once customer, we will go ahead and order it for you at the store using our online system. And people may think that you may lose money doing that. I need to figure out a way to turn off my my announcements. But people may think that you're diluting your sales, and that's the old school approach. You say, well, why are you doing this? You're diluting your sales over time. But the problem is, in online retailing, like you and many others distinctly stated, those rules don't apply anymore because people don't have to buy stuff at your place. They can just go to an online retailer after they try on that pair of shoes. So traditional retailers, Staples is doing this more, Office Depot, Best Buy, they're saying, hey, we want your business. If you don't want to buy your stuff now, and if you want to buy it cheaper, we'll order it for you in the store. So that's traditional retailers trying to respond to the online retailer strategies, which I think is pretty cool. I like that. I like it when industries evolve to meet new markets. So
it does two things for Macy's in this example. It keeps their inventory low because they only keep maybe one or two pairs of that shoe in that size on hand, and also kind of smooth it. It helps out with their orders.
You're absolutely right. I didn't think about that, but you're right. It helps the stores keep lower supplies at the store. And it also allows you to control your demand. And that's a very important strategy. I don't think people appreciate how powerful it is to be able to control the demand for your product. So I just wanted to add this because a lot of people don't think about this when they start looking at rebate strategies. And I just wanted to add this as a supply chain related strategy. So does this make sense? It sounds like you've got a pretty good handle on it with your questions. So go back up here. Okay, so there are some tips that there's a book that I use, Supply Chain for Theory of Constraints, that had just listed a few of these, and there's other ones that I've picked up over time. So these are very important recommendations. Because you can inadvertently do things to damage your ability to supply a product. And several students actually mentioned this. They didn't quite link it to supply chains, but they did a pretty good job nonetheless. Let's say you say, hey, look, if you buy by next week, we'll toss in a free toaster. Well, the problem with this strategy is you don't have control over the demand. You basically have to say, anybody that shows up to buy this, you have to provide a toaster. So what this does two things. One, it spikes your demand to a point where you may not be able to meet it. But number two, it also shifts demand in the opposite direction. A quick story, Campbell's Soup, this is a few years back, Russ Akoff, he's one of my favorite thinkers. He was a systems thinker. He had this story about Campbell's Soup where they had where marketing had this really great idea where they were going to have this fall sale of cream of mushroom soup. I think it was cream of mushroom soup was half price. He said, yeah, and their thinking was, we make a lot of cream of mushroom soup early in the year, so if we have a big sale, by next week, we can sell all this stock. And it worked out great. But what they found out is soup is something that you could buy and keep on a shelf for 6 months. So what they did is you have all these people who, and you've probably seen it, you chase sales. If you know that it's going to go on sale in the future, you're just going to buy a whole bunch of the product now, let it sit on the shelf. And what that does is that takes away your future sales. So what you also do is you spike your demand, but you also decrease
demand drop
over time.
Yes.
Exactly. So now
Spike this month, but over the 6 months, it drops for the other 5.
and you create demand oscillations, which is great in that month because you say, hey, we got rid of all this spare inventory and we met our fixed costs. Wonderful. But next month you go, wow, nobody's buying cream of mushroom soup for some reason. Well, it's because the people who would have bought it that month bought it the month before when it was half price. So, and Campbell's didn't realize this for about a year or so before they started to realize, they almost went out of business with this strategy. Till all of a sudden they started to say, hey, something's going on here. And then they hired a company to basically tell them that, hey, you are destroying your demand over time. So I always, and this is pretty common in theory of constraints literature. Avoid using end of quarter sales promotions or rebates. Try to use like everyday low price. We have an everyday low price of this. Walmart's very good at that. Walmart doesn't like to do a lot of sales because they learned from other companies. If you have a lot of like, buy this stuff now, it's going to create these spikes where you may be affecting your demand. That'll be next month or the following month. Walmart has sales, but their sales are a little more strategic.
And they could probably do sales on something that you're not going to buy multiple items of, like TVs or sofas or but repeat items, consumables.
Correct. Like no, you're right, and that's a good point. For high cost durable goods, you don't want to sell a whole bunch now because you're going to take a huge hit later on. So in your supply chain, use small batches and level production as much as possible. What you want to do is you want to have your production leveled so you have consistent output every month, because this allows you to be able to match your demand to your ability to produce. And that's very important. Large batches is a risk because when you make large batches, your lead time to make large batches is longer than a lead time to make small batches, obviously. If I got to make 20, I've actually tested this. Sometimes I'll buy hamburgers for the guys at work. Say, hey, I'll like pull up to the drive-through window and say, hey, I want 30 hamburgers. It takes a while for them to make 30 hamburgers. They're happy to take the order, but it takes them forever to make 30 hamburgers. And, if I was able to store the hamburgers in a refrigerator, I could figure out a strategy where I guess if I buy 30 hamburgers at once, I could not buy hamburgers for me, it would be about a year. But, so instead, using our prior example, you'd say, hey, tell you what, you're not going to eat 30 hamburgers, but tell you what, let's give you 5 hamburgers every 10 minutes. If our throughput, which is our time it takes to have something go through our production system, is normally 5 minutes, let me just give you 5 hamburgers every 10 minutes, and then eventually you'll have your 30 hamburgers, So that's why I say use small batches and level production as much as possible. And that's very important if you're going to use demand leveling tactics. Okay. And Amazon's very, very good at that. So improve your delivery system responsiveness and reliability. This is all about lead time. You want to reduce your lead time because as you decrease your lead time, you'll start to have people move from that at once category to your lead time category. And that is very profitable, and that's a very good position competitively. And it also relieves a lot of stress on your supply chain. the quicker your lead time, the better your supply chain can respond to deviations in demand, and the happier the people in your supply chain are, because people don't like to get that sudden order like, oh, we have to make 10,000 widgets by, by Monday. Everybody, overtime's authorized. I've worked on programs where they do that, and it burns people out, and there's other long-term problems with that also. Safety issues, equipment tears, people get burned out. So maximize external variety with minimal internal variety using the RAP. This is the principles of postponements. And basically, one of the strategies that you could use is what you want to do is reduce the amount of paths going through your production by modularizing certain things. So basically, I can bring, if you want, once we're finished, I can go over it real quick. I'll just bring up last week's slides. But basically what you want to do is you want to modularize your production so that you could use the same subcomponent over multiple product lines. And what this does, this shrinks your lead time on multiple production lines, which as a result allows you to design a modular system to improve lead time. And that's a way to provide external variety through additional product lines. The discussion question last week was about a company with Meditech. If they have a whole bunch of product lines and they want to continue the sales of your old stuff while providing new products, one thing they could do is use principles of postponement to modularize the production of similar components within your production chain. Now you have other problems of diluting the sales of your old products that wouldn't address, obviously. But that if they were intent on going down that route of providing all these product lines, they could do that. It would decrease the lead time.
So it's about planning, like trying to make the same types of equipment that use the same either setup or products. Correct. In that.
Correct. Like for instance,
minimizing structure changes on production.
Yeah, correct. Like for instance, if you look at airplanes, you may have like a 747, you may have like a 100, 200, 300, 500. They all use the same frame. They all have the same skin. They all may have the same seats. But there are differences between those where they can say, okay, we can build these planes up to a point where everything is the same. And then if you want extra variability, like extra, let's say, you want fuzzy dice, or, for lack of a better term, they can get it pretty much built up to the point where the customer customizes it. If you can do that, then your lead time for all of your customizations is set to a certain point, which is great because then you can say, oh, if you want your fuzzy dice option, that's an extra week on your lead time and it'll cost a little bit extra money. And then you can use those other strategies to say, hey, look, and this is something that I've seen when you buy cars at the dealership. They'll say, hey, look, if you want to wait a little while, we'll add a set of tires or whatever. Because basically, the cars can be the same thing, except they may add a radio, or they may add tires, or they may add a sunroof. Things that are easier to add on later on that may have a low lead time. Does that make sense? Okay. But if you would like me to, I'm going to do this anyway. I'll make the presentation for principles of postponement if I can. So place inventory in the supply chain based on customer lead time expectations if possible. If you find that a certain type of customer is always needing stuff earlier than your lead time, you put safety stocks where those customers are. Okay. And this is all about safety stock strategies. The book talks about them a little bit later on. This is a pretty good way to match your lead time with your customer expectations. and exploit the lower costs once your fixed costs have been met. As I mentioned first, if you've met your fixed costs, yeah, have a sale. As long as your supply chain can meet the demand that you're going to have with that sale. Okay. If you have a sale and your supply chain is already stretched out, you're doomed. And this is a lot of, I see this a lot where marketing says, hey, I just got a $20 million order to sell 10,000 widgets. And the supply chain manager and your operations guy goes, we can't fulfill that. But the manager who gets rewarded on how much stuff he sells goes, well, that's not my problem. It's your problem now. So all of a sudden, the supply chain can't meet the demand. Customers get all upset and leave. Whose fault is it? Is it the marketing guy for selling what they can't make, or is it the supply chain for not making what is sold? If you're the
This is why
marketing,
production guys hate salespeople, and salespeople hate production guys.
that's been going on since the dawn of time, and it's funny. I hear from both sides, and they both think they're right, and I guess in a way they both are, but ideally you'd have them linked together. And in theory of constraints, they put a lot of attention on that. Match the marketing to your supply chain, or else you're just going to be spinning your wheels all day long. So, any questions?
Nope. I was just going to comment on what you just said.
No, go ahead, please.
The railroads do that as well because GE Manufacturing makes the one type of locomotive, and they make it for all the big four North American railroads. And, Norfolk Southern says they want their 25 locomotives in the first quarter. And, GE's like, well, if you will spread that order out, then we'll give you discounts on your later locomotives so that they can make, 5 locomotives for Norfolk Southern, 5 for CXX, 5 for BNSF, and 5 for Union Pacific. And they stretch out. They stretch out their manufacturing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it makes sense for them. And one of the 3 constraints tactics they also have related to what you just stated is they'll say, hey, marketing, we may not be able, we may have maxed out our ability to produce product A, but product B is only at half, we're only meeting half of our capacity. And since we've already met our fixed costs, why don't you go up to the customer and say, hey, we can't give you 5,000 product A, but we'll give you 5,000 product B, and we'll give you a little bit of a cut in price because we've already met the fixed costs. So this is all profit. So, and you'd be surprised at how many customers say, okay, yeah, I may have been expecting product A, but I really don't need product A. I can do product B. Yeah, and that's very powerful. But you got to have control over your supply chain. You have to have control over your lead time, and as you said, you got to have control over your marketing. Which sometimes it's hard.
GE's, a huge company, and just to make their locomotives, they have 55,000, products in their supply chain, so it's probably very difficult to do that.
Yeah. But they probably have different strategies that are similar to this that they use. That it would be much easier for them to do it than it would be for me, obviously, because I come from a different industry. So, is there any questions?